Hi there, we're going to do Mr. Nonsense today. Mr. Nonsense has no sense at all, not a scrap. I mean, he lived in a tree. A tree, can you imagine? Why do you live in a tree, Mr. Happy asked him one day. Because, replied Mr. Nonsense, I tried living on the ground, but it was too high up, so I moved to a tree to be nearer the ground. What nonsense, snorted Mr. Happy. Thank you, replied Mr. Nonsense. And do you know what Mr. Nonsense liked to eat? Porridge. Nothing wrong with that, you might say, but porridge on toast? Really? Why do you like porridge on toast? Mr. Nosey asked him one day. Because, replied Mr. Nonsense, I tried porridge sandwiches and I didn't like them. And do you know where Mr. Nonsense sleeps every night? In a rowing boat, in his bedroom, in his house, up a tree. Why do you sleep in a rowing boat? Mr. Strong asked him one day. Because, replied Mr. Nonsense, I tried sleeping in a motorboat, but it was somewhat uncomfortable. Mr. Nonsense lives, as you might very well expect, in a country called No Nonsense Land. Now, I know somebody else who lives in No Nonsense Land. Do you? That's right, Mr. Shilly. Mr. Shilly and Mr. Nonsense were close friends and saw a lot of each other. Mr. Nonsense was often round at Mr. Shilly's house playing jigsaw puzzles. They used to throw the pieces at each other. How silly. Mr. Shilly was often round at Mr. Nonsense's house playing cards. They used to tear them up to see who could get the most pieces out of one card. What nonsense. However, this story is about the time it snowed in Nonsense Land. It didn't very often snow, but one winter it did. Now tell me, what colour is snow? No, in Nonsense Land, when it snows, it doesn't snow white snow. It snows yellow snow. Don't ask me why, but it does. Yellow snow. And when Mr. Shilly woke up one morning, the whole of Nonsense Land was covered. I say, he said when he looked out of his bedroom window, snow! And he was so excited he rushed round to Mr. Nonsense's house. Mr. Nonsense was asleep in boat. Wake up, cried Mr. Shilly, wake up and come and look out of the window. What on earth is it? Grumbled Mr. Nonsense, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes as he got up and went across to his bedroom window. I say, he said, looking out. Custard! That isn't custard, you silly banana, cried Mr. Shilly. That's snow. He rushed downstairs. Come on, he called. And that day, Mr. Shilly and Mr. Nonsense had one of the very best days of their lives. They had a snowball fight. Mr. Shilly's snowballs were round. Mr. Nonsense made snowballs. He somehow or other came out sort of square. They built a snowman, a very silly, nonsensical sort of snowman. Come on, said Mr. Nonsense that afternoon. Let's go tobogganing. We don't have a toboggan, said Mr. Shilly. No, we don't, said Mr. Nonsense. Mr. Shilly thought. Oh, yes, we do, he cried. And Mr. Shilly ran back to Mr. Nonsense's house and came back with his bed. Whee! They shouted together as they slid faster and faster down the hill with their rowing boat toboggan. That looked fun. It was a wonderful day, and that evening, after having supper together, it was porridge pie, Mr. Nonsense suggested that they played a game. What shall we play? Asked Mr. Shilly. Drafts, suggested Mr. Nonsense. I've forgotten how to play drafts, said Mr. Shilly. Oh, it's easy, replied Mr. Nonsense. And went round and round, opening all the doors and windows. There we are, drafts. What nonsense. The end.